G'day, everybody. Hope you are enjoying your Sunday evening of this another long weekend. Hope everyone's had a good weekend, managed to get out and do some geocaching. I'm Purple Cache Eater, if you don't know me, and I am the host of the Geocaching Down Under podcast. And Geocaching New South Wales have actually asked me to host this evening tonight. So we'll be having a reviewer information session, sorry, not a centre. And so I've got one reviewer coming on for you this evening. So people have submitted questions earlier to Geocaching New South Wales. We have put them all together and we will ask them. If you do have other questions, though, please feel free to pop them in the chat room. I will try and get them answered if we don't already ask that question. Please be respectful and mindful that children do watch this program as well. So please keep it PG and please be kind to one another. That's all I ask of you. So without further ado, I will bring on tonight's review and we will get this show started. And welcome, Ngaambul. How are you?
Good, thanks, PCE. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. How's your weekend been? You managed to get out geocaching?
Yeah, I did. I managed to do a few adventure labs through Sydney yesterday, but the trouble with that is that your phone battery doesn't last, and my power pack died, and so I had to pull up short. But it was a good weekend.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I'm the same. I've actually gone on a road trip this weekend, and so I'm actually in Melbourne this weekend. So
Wow.
yeah, I can understand about the battery power. Awesome. All right, well, let's get into tonight's show here. So let me pop you there. Now, first question is nice and simple for you. How did you become a reviewer?
Well, I was involved with the Geocaching Australia website as one of the senators back in the day, and they were looking for some new reviewers within the country, and the ump was also pretty active at that time, and he kind of put up a bit of a post in the senators section saying any thoughts on people that could kind of help out, and I happened to put my hand up at the time and didn't think much more of it, and then sort of 3 months later I got tapped on the shoulder and said to you, like, were you serious? Like, are you really keen to do it? So that was kind of how that came on board. These days it's probably a little bit different. We really look out into the community and look for people that we work with all the time, and look for, you know, those cache owners that are just always spot on. You know, they know the guidelines. That when they're submitting their cache pages, they're just a breeze to kind of review, and they're really helpful. The other thing is that they're pretty active in the community, right? Like you want people who are active within the community, who are respected within the community, and I think that that is really kind of our process sort of these days. And you know, once we bring somebody on board, like, they don't have to know everything, but we then support them. So you know, when we brought Jingery on board, you know, in Queensland, you know, he and I worked really closely together, lots of Zoom calls, and there's lots of training materials that HQ give us, but a lot of it is just support within the reviewer community, just to kind of help you along. So
yeah, exactly. Now, I know you've sent me through a link. I'm going to share that in the chat here. So that's about, let me pop that in there. So that is about about the community volunteers and the community volunteer reviewers, and a little bit more information there. So
yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of HQ. I think it's titled "Working with the Reviewer," but then there's a little bit at the bottom that says how do you become a reviewer. So it's probably one of the most asked questions that we get. Look, really, what you've got to do is just you know, be a good cacher, work within the community, and you never know when you might get a tap on the shoulder.
That's right. Well, would you say it is a good time to look at a person becoming a reviewer when they've found, say, X amount of geocaches or X amount of years and they've seen a bit?
Oh, look, it's certainly, you know, the amount of times that I've had an email from a person who's just started caching and they've found like 3 caches and they go, oh, you've got a cool job. Like, I'd really love to be one, you know, and you have to be really gentle and just say, look, you know, maybe in a few years, there's no real minimum. You know, we don't say you have to be a cacher for 10 years and have found 20,000 caches. You know, we've got reviewers who have found lots of caches. We've had reviewers that have found not so many caches. You know, we've had reviewers that are younger, reviewers that are older. It really is about that personality that we talked about, the people that communicate well, that, you know, in their review note when they're submitting their case, it's not just thanks, it's a good deal of detail about what they're doing, how they found their coordinates, you know, all that sort of stuff. You know, their spelling's pretty good. You know, they can communicate with people, but also that they're willing to work within their community to do things as well. You know, they might be a member of an association. They might be used to working with government departments. They might host lots of events. You know, those sorts of things are all play a part, I guess, in that decision process.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you need someone who's participating in the sport and cares about it and is active and enthusiastic. Yeah, all of that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's not, you know, it's not one thing or another. It's all of those things together. So
right. Okay. Now, is reviewing caches a solo task, or do other reviewers get involved as well?
Yeah, look, I would say that a lot of the time, you know, the day-to-day stuff is pretty basic, and it is solo, right? I just saw Dark Side Dan there pop up. You know, if I'm looking through and Dan's been out for the weekend, and sorry, Dan, to call you out, but you've been out for the weekend, there might be 5 or 10 sort of drop into the queue. Most of his I can kind of push through. Dan leaves great notes. He tells me how they're hidden, you know, the solution to the puzzle, all of that sort of stuff. But occasionally we might get something, and it's quite often more the challenge cases that are a little bit more out there, or, you know, some of the virtuals. It's typically, if you've got something that's a bit different, we'll do things like we might bounce sort of ideas to other reviewers. Now, that'll be either within the Australian team. Now, I might go to one person, or I might go to multiple or the whole reviewer group as a whole and go, what do you think of this? You know, I'm worried that it might not meet this guideline, and get their kind of thoughts. And normally then if they kind of go, oh, you know, not sure, there's also forums available to us. You know, I can go to the entire world reviewing team and go, what are your kind of thoughts? Like, we really like this idea, but it doesn't kind of, how can we get it over the line? Or we can go to HQ. And, you know, for those that aren't aware, there's an appeals process that people can have. So if you're not happy with your reviewer's decision, you don't feel that it reflects the guidelines or the intent of the guidelines, you can go to Geocaching HQ and they can have a look at it for you. Sometimes as reviewers, we'll actually submit an appeal on their behalf and say, look, guys, it doesn't meet this requirement. Is there a chance that we could try it out, or that, you know, make some tweaks here or there and make it work? And so an appeal doesn't have to always be started by the cache owner. It can be started by a reviewer if we think it's just on the borderline, but we're not 100% sure. So
okay, that's cool. Now, I know that you originally started with a different reviewer name. Can you tell us a little bit about how come you've changed your name?
Yeah, so years ago I started as Ministro, and Ministro was a Latin word that meant to serve. Now, I studied Latin at high school. That was why I kind of picked it. I tried a few other names at the time, couldn't really find anything. Aboriginal words kind of appealed to me, but any of the, I guess, the dreaming kind of stories it just didn't feel kind of right. Necessarily for me.
Well, I was going to ask that of you, actually. I thought there was like a theme that you had to pick too.
No, not really. So HQ just say go and pick a name, and so I picked just something in Latin because it was easiest for me, and I found out it wasn't being used. I think some of the other things were being used at the time. Over that time, though, since I became a reviewer, just about each of the reviewers have come on board, they've picked an Aboriginal name. And so for me, it really felt right to have that link to First Nations people. And so I thought, you know what, I know I've had that for 10 years, and it is hard for people because they still, I still get emails to the old email address and stuff. But Ngaambul was kind of a word for me that really suited. So Ngaambul means magpie in Gatang, which is the local language of the Warramai people, which is the Newcastle area of which I live. And magpie to me was really synonymous about flight and freedom. My football team is also the Magpies. It really tied a lot of things together. So that's where Ngaambul came from, and I kind of think it fits now. Every reviewer in Australia now has an Indigenous name, which is really, really good to see. But different countries have different ideas. In Canada, I think just about all of the reviewing teams start with cache. So there's like cache own or cache viewer or trying to think about some others. But so different countries have different kind of ideas.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I'm glad you explained about the native Australian names, because I thought that was a prerequisite. You had to choose a native Australian name. Oh, that's great.
The only reviewer names that are pretty fixed are the Earth Cache reviewers, and they all have GeoAware something. So I think in Australia we've had GeoAware Anzac, we've had GeoAware ANZ and GeoAware ANZ2. There might be a couple of others that have been around, but the Earth Cache reviewers all have GeoAware something. But that's the only ones that are really fixed.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. Now I also have a little note here about your profile pictures as well with the change.
Yeah, so I look, it's a magpie, right? Ngaambul means magpie, so therefore it's a magpie, and that was just a magpie picture that I found at some stage that I really liked. So. Yep.
And what was your profile picture when you were Ministro?
Ministro was like a Roman helmet, I think. So because of the Latin kind of tie, that was why I used to have that one. So really, there's not too much needed to be read into those ones. They're pretty simple.
Excellent. The simpler the better. Can't confuse those. Oh dear. So how much of your time do you spend reviewing caches?
Oh, look, how long's a piece of string? So I think on average, I've kind of looked over the last 11 years, I'm probably averaging about 1,800 to 2,000 caches a year. So that's about 30 or 40 a week on average. Now, that obviously goes up and down a lot. And for a lot of years, I think for nearly 9 years, I had my wife was a reviewer as well. So she took a big chunk of that work while I was reviewing. I think between us in the household, we've probably reviewed about 30,000 geocaches over the last 10 years. So there's a fair few kind of have gone through. But look, you can have a week where you open up the queue and somebody's gone and put 100 new caches out. And so 100 caches, a lot of people think that, it's just a trail, right? They've all got the same description. It's all going to be pretty easy. They still need to be reviewed all individually to make sure that they meet the guidelines. Now, where it can really take time is if somebody goes, can I get all of those please reviewed, all published at the same time. Now I might go through and find a problem with 3 out of those 100. I've then got to go through and sort out what's wrong with the 3, then disable the other 97, and then they all come back into the queue. So like there's things like that can really add a lot of time. On average, there's probably, I don't know, I'd say 2, 3, 4 hours a week, maybe, I guess, is what is involved.
Okay.
Kind of.
So it totally doesn't. It just doesn't dominate your time. It's a few hours.
No, it's but I guess so. That's the reviewing aspect. So then there's dealing with emails. Then there's going through and having a look at the needs maintenance and needs archive kind of logs or the caches that have been moved. So look, I think you could say 5 to 10 hours a week is probably somewhere in that range is what we typically spend. Now, some reviewers might do more than that, but that's about my kind of limitation. Sorry, I noticed in the chat, Google Hi has kind of posted a thing saying, wasn't Ministro a little yellow man? Ministro was towards the end. Ministro was actually a piece of pixel art, and it was a pixel art of a firefighter. So it was a photo of me wearing breathing apparatus. That's what it was, because I'm also a volunteer within the RFS. So
right, okay. Well, now you mention it, I'm like, yes, I do remember that little yellow man, the little fire suit. There you go. Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, while we're off track a little bit, I've also got another question here from Annie joining us on Facebook. So, hi, Angel G27. Thanks for joining us live. Your question is, when do reviewers log caches under the reviewer name? Is there a rule or a convention?
So for me, the only time I log something under my reviewer name is events, typically. So I've logged, the only exception to that is HQ. When I visited HQ, I logged that as a reviewer, but that was because I went and spoke to the volunteer team there. I got a bit of a back of house tour and kind of enjoyed that trip. So I logged that. I don't log any non-event caches under my reviewer name, and I don't, have stickers or anything like that I put into geocaches or sign logs under my reviewer name. The rule for me around logging something with my reviewer name is if I attend an event and somebody has a reviewer question for me, they come up to me and they say, hey, can I ask a question about getting a cache published or something similar? And I have to put my reviewer hat on, then Ngaambul logs that event cache because Ngaambul was present rather than Big Matt and Shell being present. So that's the logic. It's I guess it's probably a little bit convoluted for some people to understand, but I think for me it's just a way of saying Ngaambul was there and attended that event. It does cause some confusion though, right? Because people look at Ngaambul's account and go, Ngaambul's got 55 fines. What on earth would you know about like hiding a geocache? And so it kind of can get a little bit confusing sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's a good point too, because I remember I haven't seen it for a little while, but the reviewer would obviously publish the cache, and then you'd see the little reviewer note on your cache page, and it would say one find. And I figured, they had to have one find to make their account valid type thing, but I didn't know, what else.
So no, that's the logic around it. Look, for those that don't know me, I cache under Big Matt and Shell, and there's about 12,000 caches I think that I've found over time. So certainly a little bit of experience around finding geocaches and hiding them. I think we've hidden close to 100. So.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for the question, Angel G. Appreciate that. Okay, so we've covered that. You're a player yourself and you've got your own account under Big Matt and Shell. Is Shell still geocaching with you?
Yeah, Shell does a few here and there. Shell went to Thailand with a friend recently, and I kind of told Michelle that she wasn't coming home unless she'd logged a cache in Thailand because, like everyone, we like to find new countries. And
that's right. Yeah, you got to get the digital souvenir. Yeah,
absolutely. So, while she was floating around James Bond Island with her friend, in their snorkeling gear and having a lovely old time, I made sure that she took notice of how wide the caves were and how tall, and take a few photos here and there. So look, we I certainly probably find the lion's share, but no, Shell still caches here and there. So it's
great.
Yep.
That's good. All right. What else have we got here? So I know you just mentioned Thailand, but can you share some of your most memorable caches that you've either reviewed or found?
Found wise, like there's been so many. I probably don't hand out enough favorite points, but I've also got a bookmark list that I've created over time that's called the best of. So
let me put that in the chat room for everybody. There you go.
I think there's a few of those. Look, for me, the caches that I love to find are the ones that are getting out and doing some sort of adventure. So if I talk about things like along the Stony Towers, which is a older New South Wales cache that, I don't know, maybe it's got 10 finds on it or something. So not a lot of people have been there, but it is, it's a day-long hike. I didn't find it. I DNF'd that one. So just didn't quite have the courage to do the final little stretch of 100 odd meters to get to it. There's some really cool ones. If I think about Marcus Vitruvius has got some really kind of nifty stories. You follow a story and he's got one, what's called The Letter down in Victoria. Rats have got a couple that are just, getting out of your comfort zone. 1,000 Young's probably his. I love it's sitting off the escarpment in Wollongong. Just really kind of cool ones. Caches to review. Look, I love seeing people that push the limits a little bit, like as in, trying new things or trying to work. And I love the people that think ahead of time and go, Matt, I've got this idea, let's give it a go, rather than pouring everything into something and then finding out, I can't do that, because I feel horrible, right? Somebody's
Of
all
course,
blood into something, and then I've got to be the baddie that says no, sorry. But yeah, I think those ones that are just that you've worked through with a person to get over the line, and a lot of people don't realise that, it's for some of those ones it can take 3 or 4 months to get it up and running and get it done. They're probably the ones. The general sort of stuff to review, I love people that give me good reviewer notes. Like if somebody tells me, how they hid their cache, what type of container it is, how it's hidden. They've attached some great photos to the reviewer note. If there's a puzzle, they walk you through the puzzle solution, not just saying it's a Caesar shift cipher, following into a blah 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 blah. It's the ones where they actually step it out and they say, like, at this step you perform a Caesar shift cipher, and that gives you these words, and then you go to this, and you go to this, and you go to this. And because really what we're doing as a reviewer, when we're looking at those ones, is we want to make sure, one, is it possible? Can somebody actually come along and solve it? And there's a kind of a point that we're looking for where it's not a what am I thinking? There's got to be some sort of logical kind of step for somebody to walk through one of those geocaches. That can be really kind of subjective, but we really try and make sure that it is possible for people to try and find that. But if I have to sit there and try and solve somebody's puzzle when they give me 3 words to kind of work from, it can take a lot of time. So
that's right. Yeah. So basically you want people to give you absolutely all the information possible so that you can very quickly and very easily understand completely what they've done and what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just saves that. One, it means that I can go publish really quickly if it's all good. If there's a problem, we can work around how do we solve that problem. And it means that we don't have to then go after the fact and say, I shouldn't have published this one because you didn't tell me about this, and this point, and now I'm going to have to archive it. Like that's never a fun experience for anybody.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here in the chat room. Pop this up. If this question is inappropriate, feel free not to answer it. How can we get new caches to pick up and be involved in communicating and sharing? My beginners series SSC gets plenty of hits on the traditional caches, but the challenge series is getting nothing from beginner who qualify. Was it 9? Would that be more information on the cache page?
Possibly. It could also be a premium member versus basic member kind of problem. So I know that if you're a basic member and you're geocaching on the app, then I think these days, and I might double check that one and I'll come back and confirm it. But I think puzzles maybe are excluded. I don't think that they're available to non-premium members. Or maybe it's puzzles after a certain difficulty sort of point. So there's certainly steps around difficulty, whether that gets presented to a non-premium member or not. So
that's a good point, because it's been so long since I've been a non-premium member. I can't remember what the restrictions were. That's right. Yeah, that's a good point.
But it certainly could be related to that. Look, I think was the other thing to do is maybe. Local events are great, right? Because you can actually talk to the people in the local area and get some understanding around, well, maybe why not? I remember going to events in the early days around Newcastle and then a few around Queensland where you'd bump into people and they might not have had the confidence to kind of pick up a puzzle, or they're not really sure how to get started, or they just probably weren't even aware that they were really around there. So that's another thought.
Yeah, that's right. All right, might be a nice little quick question for you here. Martin joining us on Facebook. How many Aussie reviewers are there, and how do they divvy up the queue?
So there's 5 of us currently, and and the way we pretty well divvy it up is state-based. So we just sort of divide it up basically around workload, so that we've all got a similar kind of workload, but it's state. So for me, I look after New South Wales and ACT, Jingeri is Queensland, Bunjil's Victoria, Chingle's South Australia, and then Balyang has the remainder of the country.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Nice. A little bit back to our previous question there. Benjamin Manning joining us on Facebook says no unknown listed for basic members on the app. So
there you go. That's probably why.
Might have to have a look at those. Yeah. Okay, alrighty. So back onto there. Cheeky little question here. Are you allowed to find caches that you have reviewed yourself? I imagine that's a yes.
That is a yes. I've often had people say to me, but you know the puzzle solution. I don't find that many puzzles. And trust me, by the time I've read 40 different cache listings through the week, I'm struggling to remember them the next week, let alone 6 months later when I come along.
That's right.
The only thing I will say it probably does is it helps you recognize certain types of puzzles based on the page. Like you can look at the page and quite often and go, oh, yeah, I reckon that's going to be a Caesar shift, or I reckon it's going to be this or this, or, but, I don't generally tend to find too many. We are, when it comes to first to finds, we kind of tend to stay away from puzzles, right? Because that's, you are given a bit of a head start on that. But there's nothing stopping me. I still get first to finds occasionally. If I publish something, I live just north of Newcastle. If there's something published in Port Stephens, and I've got nothing to do, then by the time I get to the end of the queue, I might go out for a drive. And if I happen to get first to find, I get first to find. I got first to find on a virtual only last weekend, but it had been out for 6 months and no one else had tried hard enough to kind of get to it. So too bad.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah, if there's plenty of time given, other people have got a chance to get it. It's not like you're racing out there 2 minutes after it's been published and snivelling it. So
it was a little bit more difficult up in the Barrington Tops with sort of seasonal road closures due to snow and a few other sort of things. Yeah. So I think you had to work to get to it.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of reviewing caches, when you're reviewing one, is there a Groundspeak checklist that you need to go through to publish the cache?
Really, no. So the short answer is no. But the guidelines are the checklist, right? The geocaching guidelines are what we as reviewers have in the back of our mind as we're reading a geocaching listing. So submission, you've got kind of the guidelines that sit there, and they're kind of that overarching sort of piece, and then sitting underneath that is the help center articles. So the geocaching guidelines might talk about size, but doesn't actually then define size of the cache as tightly as what the help center does. So the help center will say that a micro is something under 100 milliliters, that a small is blah 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 blah. So we kind of have those in the back of our heads. The other thing that we really kind of use a lot is the local regional policies. So for those that aren't aware, there's a regional policies for Australia, and so they're all Australia-wide kind of policies. And underneath that, then there's some New South Wales ones, and that just contains details around like how do you work with national parks, what are the requirements for within national parks. I'm just trying to think what else is in there these days. There's some stuff in there around community managed geocaches. So they're, those really old school kind of geocaches that the cache owner might have stopped playing the game quite some time ago, and there's a community interest in kind of keeping them going and making sure that they're not kind of lost forever. So there's some pretty kind of strict guidelines, because we don't to do that, the reviewer kind of takes on board a bit of responsibility for maintaining the listing, the community takes on board for maintaining the container. We really don't want to have every single geocache become a community kind of managed geocache, so we stipulate that pretty well. There's some other stuff I think around like areas that are kind of restricted, like Barangaroo and the M7 motorways in Sydney. Sydney Olympic Park's got some details as well. I can't think what else is in there at the moment around the New South Wales one. But
that's all right. So what I've done is I've popped those 3 links that you talked about in there: the guidelines for hiding a geocache, the help center, so how to hide a geocache, and all the different things under that. And then I've also put in the WikiGroundspeak link as well, which is the guidelines, policies for Australia, and then the breakdown of the states as well. So that's all there in the chat room for you all as well. Alrighty. Okay, I've got a couple of comments here in the chat room. One here from Tank Engine in ACT. Do caches without fines, hiding their first cache, have to provide extra information to convince the reviewer that it's okay?
Convince the reviewer is probably not the wording I would use, but we certainly have a note that for a first-time geocacher, we do a bit of a welcome. There's some legal stuff that we have to confirm. So we have to confirm that if they're a child, that they're geocaching under the supervision of an adult. We then ask some pretty specific questions around how the container is hidden, the type that the container is, also around coordinates. Like there was a really bad spate a couple of years ago around new geocachers coming on board with phones, and now phone accuracy is one part of that, but there's actually also an issue around coordinate format. So a lot of phones don't have coordinates in the right format. People go and type them into the listing or into the cache submission page, and they put decimal points where there shouldn't be, or they don't, and then it kind of passes through. And you can find that caches can be kind of 30 meters out of whack. So we do ask newbies some really specific questions around how did you get your coordinates? How did you hide the cache? What have you done? We're testing things like making sure they haven't dug a hole, or making sure it's not on a power pole, or lots of those sorts of regular things, I guess, that we see that somebody who is new to the game. And look, I would say, so I looked at the queue today, and out of 15 cases that have been submitted in the last sort of 24, 48 hours, probably half of them were newbies. And of those newbies, most of them had less than 3 fines. So they're people who haven't really necessarily even found a geocache yet, and they're wanting to go out and hide them. So you're really just trying to make sure that we're doing good. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, like you say, they need the experience to understand, the different factors involved. And I know, geocaching are big advocates for saying, find at least 100 caches before you decide to hide one.
Yeah. And I think the guidelines now say something like we kind of recommend that you go out and find at least 20. But there's nothing sort of hard and fast, and so we have to review to those guidelines. So, but we will certainly ask a little bit more. That said, I've had submissions before from really seasoned geocachers and people that are probably close personal friends of mine that I've cached with over the years. And if they submit a geocache and it just says "Thanks, Matt" in it, I'll go back to them and say, "Hang on, I need a little bit more detail, right?"
Yeah.
So I treat everybody the same. And I think, was it Tank Engine that you said asked the question around do we ask something about newbies? If Tank Engine put in a geocache that didn't have any detail around the container and how it was hidden, then I'd push back to him as well. So
that's right.
The difference is, Thomas has got I think he's over 1,000 hides these days. Or like it's a pretty significant number. I kind of assume that by now he's worked out how to use his GPS, knows his coordinate format, and can kind of enter the coordinates in the right way. So there's a little bit of leeway that might get given.
Yeah, but still not just, carte blanche, there's still got to be some explanations
Yeah,
there.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
it just makes it easier if I look at it and I'm looking at it, the aerial photo, and all I can see is a telegraph pole at that location, and there's no detail in the note, then I'm going to assume that it's hidden on the telegraph pole. Now, in New South Wales, that's actually illegal. There's specific legislation that says that you cannot do that. So, that it just gives us that upfront information. And what might be there might be a tree or a post or something that they've hidden it on, but I can't see that. So
Yeah, fair enough. Now, in terms of like mysteries, can a puzzle cache be too difficult and therefore not approved, or do you check that the puzzle actually works?
so we certainly tested. That was what I was talking about before. I tested that logic that it can go through, and that there's a logical step, right? If somebody has I call it the "what am I thinking" kind of puzzle. You have to have a insight into somebody's brain and guess what they've been thinking. Then that's probably not okay. But if there's a logical kind of concept, and it can be multi-layered, it can be really tough, right? That's why we have difficulty ratings, but there's a limit as to how far that will go. But if there's logical steps through, and the hint might talk about something, or there might be sort of stuff hidden in the source code as you go through, but there has to be something that kind of helps the geocacher to get through that.
Yeah, some sort of breadcrumb for them to follow. Yeah,
spot on.
Right. Yeah. Alrighty then. Well, in terms of requirements, what are the requirements to have a bonus cache for an Adventure Lab published at the same time that you activate the Adventure Lab?
So this is a pretty common misconception. There is no need to have the Adventure Lab fully public on the Adventure Lab site for your cache to get published.
Okay.
There's actually even recently, so what used to happen up until probably 2 weeks ago was I used to ask everybody at least has a link to the Adventure Lab on their page, and the Adventure Lab was set to private. So what I would do before I'd review is I would scan the QR code or go to the link and make sure that it came up in the app and that you could at least play it. It didn't have to be public, so it didn't have to be out there. Geocaching has kind of said that it doesn't even need to be that now. Once the cache lands in the queue, we'll review it and publish it, and then the community, the community will let that cache owner know pretty quickly if that Adventure Lab isn't live. So look.
Okay.
I kind of think it's nice to have it that it's at least set to private so that people can find it straight away. But anyway, that's the way that we're kind of moving now. So
right, okay then. Okay, no worries.
But the reason behind that is the guidelines for a puzzle say that the puzzle must be findable, and so if you kind of need something that steps them towards the Adventure Lab. So that's
fair enough. Fair enough. Now, when a cache owner asks, we touched on this a little before as well, when a cache owner asks for publishing on a specific date and time, is there an automatic process for you, or do you need to publish these manually at the requested moment? How does that work?
So there's certainly, and I can't talk too much about how the site works, but there's certainly an ability for us to kind of lock in a time and say publish it into the future. So, if somebody's, I don't know, it's typically for an event, right? They want to have 5 caches published in the local area around the closing time of their event. And I'd really suggest the closing time to people, not the starting time, because otherwise you'll find that most people won't turn up to your event. But anyway, that's your choice. We have the ability to do it. Where it gets really ugly is if people want different times, like to do different times. It's not too bad saying, okay, do these next 5 at this time, or if they want to change things. So you really need to be sure that your caches are ready and good to go, because for me to reverse that process and then give them back to you to kind of do something, because what happens is that cache gets locked and the cache owner can't do anything more with that until it gets published. So you really want to make sure that things are right. So
okay. So you've sort of preloaded them and they're just sitting in waiting, ready to go
sitting
live.
there kind of waiting. Yeah, absolutely.
So the sort of temporary live but not public type sort of thing. Yeah, okay, fair
Yep.
enough. So do you have a hand in, this is a little bit off topic, do you have a hand in like when a state puts on a mega? Is that you publishing those, or do you get a help from HQ for those?
No, so we publish mega events.
Yep.
I think there's a couple of megas that I've certainly done in the past, and I think there's even some sitting there ready to go fairly soon. So
Right. Cool.
there's we once it gets sort of the approval from HQ, they hand it back to us to make sure that it meets the local requirements.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I know quite a lot of the megas these days, they like to put out like a challenge series or some geo art or something. And, some of those can have hundreds in them. And I was just thinking, do you call in the troops to give you a hand with those, or are you sitting there looking at 500 caches?
Typically, I think we've got people reasonably well trained these days that they know that, if they want 200 caches published as part of a series, then they'll get them in early. And we ask for people to get them in kind of 4 weeks early so that we can really get ahead of the game. It also saves, us opening up the queue on X night and there's 300 caches there and you lose, somebody's got an event on that, is getting close to that 14-day mark or something else. We don't want to miss those. So we ask, and I typically, we'll tee up a time that we're going to get them all released at. And I normally ask them to say, send me 20 or 40 at a time. Don't do the 200. Once I've done those, we'll lock them in at the time that you've asked for, and then we'll do the next 40 or whatever it might be. So it just allows the rest of the queue to still get.
That's right. Yeah. You're not totally dominate all your time and exclude everyone else. So that's a good tip for people as well. Like if they do want to put out a series of, say 20 or more, or, 200, like I know Darkside Dan and Tank Engine and all that do. To really reach out to you and say, hey, this is my plan. This is what I want to do. How do we organize that? And on that point, how do you prefer people to reach out to you and start that conversation?
So if they're doing it initially, just send me an email or message sender or email. I don't care. Right? Both come straight through. Either way, we can have an initial conversation and then kind of set things up and go from there. Same goes for, if you've got an idea for something a little bit different or a little bit out there, I'm more than happy to start things off at an email. Right. Where we ask people to start to create a listing is when we want to actually kind of reserve a spot or get it kind of framed up a little bit more. If it's going to go off to HQ as an appeal, typically we like it to be in a cache listing so we can send off that cache listing. So that's probably it.
So I'd really encourage people to reach out if they've got a wacky idea or want to try something different, or they're not quite sure and got questions. Just send you a message through the message center or send you an email.
Yeah, spot on. I've just realised how dark I am, so just give me 1 second. I'll sing out and I'll get all turned on. 1 second. You're
right. I'll have a whiz through here in the chat room and see about what I have got going on here. Alrighty, so Calypso, good question there about event stacking. What I'm going to do is I've got a link here. So on the wiki guidelines post that link that I put up before was some information on there about event stacking. But for you, Calypso 63, I have found this page here, which goes into detail about event stacking. So if you've got some questions, check out that listing there, and that goes right into the detail about the event stacking. So thank you, Calypso 62.
The other thing for Bruce is that the regional policies page has some really specific detail in New South Wales around event stacking, and so. I think from memory, it's 4 hours in the built-up kind of urban areas that we like to have between events. If those events are within 30 kilometres of each other, in regional areas, we say 4 hours time difference if they're within 50 kilometres of each other. And the logic behind that, because some people go, why on earth? Why are we doing that? It's really to stop that, driving from this event to this event to this event to this event and having like 5 fines in a day that are just effectively events.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
only real exception to that is mega events get some special compensation on the day of the mega. They can hold one event in the local area. And in the Australian wiki, there's some detail around how to interact with a mega event. So we won't let anyone else publish something on the day of a mega event, I think within 100 kilometres, like it's a big distance. And that's just really, the mega event committee have done a lot of work to build an event, get things running. The last thing you want to have is 5 or 6 little satellite events where people are running off to, and the mega committee don't get their people there attending, how to solve puzzles or how to use GStack or use Cachely or whatever else the seminar might be. So that's the logic behind that. The exception to that, and I'm just trying to think, Gav does a really good job of this down at Goulburn, is you can have a Cyto event with a standard event at the front or back of it. And the logic behind that is that the Cyto should be about the activity that you're there to do. So tree planting, picking up rubbish, whatever the activity is. It's not about standing around and having a chat. So we allow an event to be either prior or directly after that, for people to have the social aspect. So and that happens a lot in Goulburn. Fitzy does that fairly regularly.
That's a fair point and a very good one. You're there to do a Cyto, like whatever the event is, you're there to do that activity, and then before or after, then you have the social event. So that's a very good point there. Now in terms of cache health, what is the cache health score and what influences the positive and the negative rating?
So probably I guess the algorithm, and excuse me, there's a plane
going over.
Plane coming through. I'll just wait 1 second.
Okay, you're right.
For those wondering why, we kind of had a few technical difficulties where my headset didn't work before this, and so PCE and I furiously running around trying to work out how we can get things running. But anyway, so I'm out the back underneath the flight path for Williamtown. At least it's not a weekday. There could be like an F-35 or a C-7 something going.
That'd be awesome.
You wouldn't hear anything. So the algorithm, even we don't get necessarily told the details around the algorithm, but it's effectively, if a geocache has a number of DNFs or number of needs maintenance or even a needs archive, then the health score is obviously going to go down. If a cache has been consistently found, the owner's going every so often and doing their own maintenance, all of those things, then the health score is going to go up. The health score for us is really just an indicator that helps us then flag things earlier. So in the bad old days, we used to have to, look for needs archive notes. Really, effectively, a needs archive was really the only way that we knew something was bad. Now people have this stigma around, I can't place a needs archive note because it's it's hard enough getting people to log DNFs. Let's be honest.
True.
Let alone going that extra step and going to a needs archive note. So we built that to really allow us to make sure that the quality of caches in an area or in anywhere are as high as they possibly can be. And we used to always wait for a needs archive note as a reviewer before a reviewer would step in and disable a cache. These days, really, once we start to get the caches that have had 4 or 5 DNFs over a period of time, over say 6 months, if the owner hasn't stepped in now, so I wait until the owner has gotten an email from geocaching headquarters saying that the health score of your cache has dropped to below an acceptable level. You need to go out and perform maintenance. I give that owner 2 weeks after that email has gone out before I'll typically step in. But I kind of figure if somebody hasn't attended to their cache after that period of time, then really it's up to us. Now, it's not just as simple as going automatically at 4 DNFs. It's going to get, we look at We look at things like the difficulty and terrain of it. We look at were all of those 4 DNFs a party of 4 all travelling together on exactly the same day? Has there been a needs maintenance posted where they probably haven't responded to it? Lots of other kind of things before we'll do it. But we will jump in and then disable the cache or take action around that cache.
Yeah. But you do give the owners a few chances, though. Like you do give them, an email and a message, and they get a decent amount of time. I think it's a month or something. They got 30 days to really post a note that they're working on it, or
oh yeah. So once it's been disabled, then really they're getting a 30-day kind of window to do something about it. Now, if they're if the park's being redeveloped and council has got a sign out the front that says, it's due to be finished in 2 weeks, 2 months, let's say. If they come along and post a note and say, the park is being redeveloped at present, I've been there, like it looks like this, blah, blah, blah. The cache, it's due to be finished at, say, let's say at the end of February. I will then look at that and go, okay, well, I'll come back and look at it in March. And if they've posted an update in early March and it's, hang on, it's going a bit longer, I'll check it again at the end of the month, all is good.
Yeah, okay.
If they've done nothing, then it starts to follow it down a different process.
Yeah, that's right. So as a hider, communication is key.
Absolutely. And it's not just about communication for us, it's about communication for the community.
Yes,
unless you as a cache owner are posting a note to say, I've checked on this one, or I'm waiting on a container to come from China, or, whatever it might be, then that's okay. But without anything, then the community kind of goes, oh, well, they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, it's abandoned. Yeah.
And I just saw that Dan's posted that question there around needs maintenance and needs archive. We used to ask for a needs maintenance before a needs archive for the typical stuff, right? The container's wet or whatever. These days, not so much. So we try and pick up on them a lot sooner than we used to, so they shouldn't get to a needs archive. The needs archive really these days is more about the title of the property has changed hands and it's now private property, and there's a sign saying keep out, or something like that. It might be something's completely wrong with the caches in. I'm just trying to think of some examples. Typically, it's around property issues, or the coordinates are 5 kilometres out, or just really kind of, or that you can't solve it anymore. So the other one is that where people like to have a bonus cache where you've had to go and find 6 others and get out of them. Well, when 3 of those others get archived, then all of a sudden that bonus one needs to be archived. So those are sort of the examples that really you tend to see these days. So
I suppose you'd probably get a few as well. Like you've got to get some details from a mural or a statue, or like a public thing. Council's come along and changed it, or the mural's been painted over, or that would throw you off as well. Yeah,
we really like to give I think the thing with the needs archive, and some people have probably seen it where people will go straight to a needs archive. I kind of like to give people a bit of a chance to respond. It's not fair to say to a cache owner, the log's wet and you post a needs archive note, or the best one I ever saw was the cache is missing a pen, and so therefore really. Anyway.
Some people would be some really harsh reviewers, wouldn't they?
It's about just giving a bit of latitude and letting the cache owner respond. Now, most people are pretty good. If you give them a needs maintenance, then they'll jump on it. But if you post a needs maintenance and nothing happens after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then okay, post a needs archive note and we'll jump on and we'll have a look at it. And it'll likely get disabled with a note saying, Come on, cache owner, you've now got 4 weeks, otherwise it'll get archived. So
that's right. Yeah, do something about it. That's right.
The only thing I'll say about needs archive, because I've seen a little bit of late, is that people will, they'll post a DNF or 3 DNFs, and then they think that because the last 3 people haven't found it, then it should be archived. And typically it's with a note like, the cache owner hasn't been online for ages, they no longer cache. Just let's be gentle a little bit, and let's kind of do that. Or there might be a needs archive, and then 2 weeks later they'll post another one and say, why hasn't anything been done? I know the process
Yeah.
can be really slow when you're just wanting to get something resolved, but let's give people a bit of a chance. There's lots of stuff going on, especially, talk New South Wales in the last year, right? We've had, 2 years, bushfires, floods.
Floods.
You don't. People could be ill. They're in hospital. Often, some people can't. As much as we'd love to say you have to be out there in 4 weeks to fix your geocache, sometimes people can't be, and there's valid reasons why not. And if they're communicating, if there's some sort of communication piece there, then we're happy to let things go a little bit longer than normal. We're not going to leave it, 9, 12 months, but we're happy to just let things go a little bit more to help people out. So, the one thing that I've noticed of late is that there just isn't probably as much sort of latitude given to people to just kind of get through whatever's going on in their personal life to get to their geocache. Because
that's right.
Strangely enough, geocaching isn't the most important thing in everybody's life.
Unfortunately. Yeah, what's wrong with these people? Well, that leads on to as well is when do you put an owner attention or a reviewer attention on the logs?
Yeah, so as I said, that owner attention, meaning needs maintenance, is about the log's a bit wet, the container's cracked, the coordinates might not be great. I kind of use, and because I largely cache with a phone these days, I kind of give a bit more, but maybe that 6 to 10, 6, maybe 8+ meters out regularly, then I kind of go, hang on, you probably need to go and get some better coordinates on that one. If it's something bad, like a property change or something significant, or they haven't responded to the others, then that's when that needs reviewer attention kind of comes into play.
Cool. So I know you talked about it as well before with maintenance of caches, but how are DNFs monitored? Is there an automated process that gives you a list with caches with a lot of DNFs?
Yeah, so
or do you manually do that?
Similar to that health score thing, we used to look at it. Used to only look at them kind of once a month, once every couple of months. But these days in New South Wales and ACT, I'm probably paying a lot more attention, just because things have kind of calmed down a little bit around some of the natural disasters. So kind of at least weekly now, I'm really trying to go through and I think, overwhelmingly, whenever I go to a mega event or an event somewhere, the feedback has been really good in this space. People love it, right? Because the game board is nice and clean. There's nothing sitting out there that's been sort of disabled for ages, whatever it might be. So I'm trying to look at those at least sort of weekly these days, just to really pick up on things and go through. But look, that's not to say that we don't miss one occasionally. So if you see something that's been disabled for 3 months, there's no notes on it. There's no notes from the reviewer, but there's some DNFs and needs maintenance. Stick a needs archive on it, and it'll pop up, and we'll certainly jump on it and
get your attention.
So
Well, that's a good point. Like, I know we've had fires and floods just in this state of New South Wales. I'm talking about. I'm just thinking about the large area of those natural disasters. How do you assess? Is it based on DNFs and needs archiving logs that get your attention?
Yeah,
to really look at.
When we're looking at a geocache, I call it sweeping. It used to get called reaping. It's had a few different names, but when we're sweeping through that needs maintenance kind of work, it is really about the detail that is on the cache page. Okay, I don't look at it and go, right, that one's in Lismore, so therefore it's going to get given 6 months versus one that's in, I don't know, Canberra that might get given more time. It is wholly and solely about the communication that is on the cache listing and the detail. Now, I think for 6 months, my notes, or probably 12 months, my notes have had a bit of a blurb in them saying, we understand that there's been some natural disasters through the state. Just communicate with us, and we're happy to give you a bit of leeway. So that's there, but it wholly and solely relies on communication. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, as Julie has rightly stated, sometimes caches are pretty hard to find, and a DNF does not always mean it's missing. It could just be a tricky one. So,
yeah, as I
the
say to lots of
yeah,
people, I found 12,000 caches. There's lots of people out there with a lot more than me, a lot more finds than me. They haven't found that new cache or that cache that has just been listed.
yeah,
So people can still DNF them with lots of fines to their count, just because now, if there's something out there that's a 1-1 or a 1.5, and it's had lots of fines, and then all of a sudden it has lots of DNFs,
yeah,
chances are something's probably wrong, right? And
yeah,
I'd probably look at somebody who has got no fines or 3 fines to their name and go, well, maybe you're still kind of learning the
yeah,
game.
yeah,
But there comes a point where it doesn't really matter how many fines they've got. If there's 5 DNFs on your cache, you as a cache owner should really
yeah,
probably go and do something about it and have a look.
yeah, yeah. So, would that be the point when you send a note to the cache owner to go check on their cache?
Yeah, so typically they'll either get, depending on sort of how far I think it's gone, they might get a reviewer note that just says, you would have gotten an email 2 weeks ago saying,
Yeah.
come on, check on your cache,
Mm,
get out there now and do that,
mm,
or I'm going to take further action. Or it might just get a disabled log that says, you now have 4 weeks to resolve
yeah,
whatever the problems are with this. I think I say 4 to 6 weeks
yeah,
to resolve whatever your problems are. If I don't get a reply within that period of time, then this case will be archived.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think one really important thing that people don't read when they get those notes, they probably don't read as well, is these. In the old days, we talk about the old days, we used to unarchive a cache. If somebody hadn't done the maintenance and it gets to the point where it got archived and they wrote back to us and said, look, I didn't see your note or whatever, then we would unarchive it for them and they could go and sort it out. These days, if your cache gets archived due to a lack of maintenance and there hasn't been a communication piece, then it won't be unarchived. So it's list a whole brand new cache. And
Yeah, okay.
people get very funny about that because
Yeah,
you lose all that history. It's an
yeah,
older GC code. It's got an
yeah,
older hidden date. There's a lot of things that tend to tie into that. So really communicate. Make sure that
yeah,
you're responding, and it's not just a "I'll get to this soon." It's a look, I'm sorry this one's dropped off. I'll make sure I have it done by this date.
yeah,
If there's something going on in the park that means that it's going to be 2 months, then write that. Write that
yeah,
there's something happening, and I'll recheck it again at this point, and we'll come back and go, okay, we'll have a look at that. Now, we still ask that people kind of go absolute maximum sort of six weeks, right, before they go back
right.
and check something. And even if it's a long-term thing, just come back, post a note and just say, checked on this one, still work's going, the signs still say that it's due to finish at the end of blah, 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 and we'll go
Yeah,
from there. So one thing that does get a bit confusing there is often people will post an owner maintenance log to say, I'm going to go out and check on this. That's not the right kind of process. The owner maintenance log means that you've done maintenance.
yeah, you've already been out there.
It doesn't mean that you're thinking about maintenance
Yeah,
sometime in the future. So I kind of tend to post a note and explain that to people. But just one thing for people to know: if you're planning something, just post a normal note. If you've actually done something, then you post an owner maintenance, and it helps us to differentiate, I guess, between the okay, I've checked, or like I'm planning to do something
yeah.
versus I've actually
I've
done something.
done something. Yeah, that's a good point there. That's a good
Yep.
point there. I've got a question here from Sandy. I have a feeling I know the answer, but she's saying if there's a crime scene in an area that caches are close to, do cache owners get notification to disable for a short time? Or
No,
that's really up to the cache owner to be aware of that situation?
totally up to
Yeah,
the cache owner. So yeah,
yeah,
it's look, there has been examples. There was a very high profile murder that happened in Queensland where a husband murdered his wife, and we were lucky that we found the detail early enough and found that there was a cache pretty close to that and disabled it. I think there's been a similar one in in South Australia, there was a person murdered near that, and we can jump on board. But really, it is up to the cache owner to maintain their listing. It's not up to a reviewer to keep an eye on every news report that kind of pops up. So
that's right. And that would tie in too with what you were saying before, with property ownership changes, or rezoning of areas, or like a walking trail or something's been shut down, and a particular area has been closed off for whatever reason. It's up to that cache owner to go, oh, my cache is no longer accessible.
Yep. And one for the people who want to do power trails, it is up to you to monitor every single geocache. It's not okay to just say, I want every single needs maintenance thing to be done onto a specific geocache. You have to monitor all of your geocaches. Now, if you own 1,000 geocaches, more the power to you. I don't have time in my life to do that, but it is for those people who want to hide lots of geocaches. It is your responsibility to monitor every single one of them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You have made that commitment in coming up with the idea. Yeah, I'm going to put out 200 in this trail. You have committed yourself to maintaining those 200. Yeah, that's true.
And
very true.
The other thing that we've seen a few of is for people that want to place those, is you can't just, the expectation is that you will maintain them. You can't just say the community is going to maintain this as they come through or anything else. No. You need to demonstrate that you will be the person maintaining them. And look, I'm totally aware that, and I've done it, you might have a Ziploc bag in your car and you find that the Ziploc bag's broken, so you replace it.
Yes,
We understand that happens as part of the community, and I think that's really good, but you can't rely on that. You have to.
No, that's right. You can't rely on it. Yeah, that's a nice happenstance, but don't rely on it. Yeah,
spot on.
Sandy's got another question here for you. What are the maximum distances you can move a cache and change coordinates before it needs to be a new cache?
So the guidelines these days, so the maximum distance anyone can move their geocache is 160 meters. It might be 161. Hang on.
Oh, okay. Which is the distance between published caches anyway.
Yeah, spot on.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The there's a help center article that if I had my other computer open, I'd be able to give you the article. But it basically talks about if you have to move it further than that, then contact your local reviewer, and the reviewer will ask you questions like, does the experience of the geocache fundamentally changed? So, have you gone from a small to a large? Have you gone from ground level to up a tree? Is it a completely different area? In which case, you're going to get asked to list it as a new geocache. If it hasn't fundamentally changed, then we will do it. But there's no way somebody's going to tell me, hang on, I've moved this geocache 5 kilometers. It hasn't fundamentally changed. I haven't found one yet that actually that meets that one. So I've just chucked in the chat room and put on the screen here is the geocaching guidelines, which has several sections in it, so you can scroll through and see the different things. But this one's just in relation to location rules. So you can go through and have a read of that, and it expands into further topics. Learn how to check for minimum distance and maximum distance and planning and mapping and all sorts there. So really have a look at the guidelines. Like they've got everything, which is exactly what you're adhering to as the reviewer anyway. So and it's just like the reason it sort of comes about is that what inevitably ends up happening is that people will move a cache significantly, and that example that I talked about, some attribute will change, or it'll be a difficulty of terrain stat might change. In that case, especially these days, that affects a lot of things because people get caught up in how many loops of their DT terrain they're doing, or a challenge case that they're trying to qualify for. So that's the reasoning behind it. And I've just shared with PCE a link to the Help Center article that actually kind of talks through it around why we have the minimum, that kind of distance. The other thing that we do that a lot of people aren't aware of is that if you move a geocache, even if you move it 2 meters, this is another task that fits into that activity that I was talking about that might not be sort of reviewing new caches, we actually have to re-review that to make sure that you haven't moved it too close to another geocache. So
that's right.
You know, you could have had a cache that you initially hid and it was only 160 meters from something, and you move it 20 meters, it's now all of a sudden too close. So and again, that'll get disabled. You know, we have to keep an eye on that. There's a bit of communication backwards and forwards. So that's another thing that can kind of happen in that sort of space. So
yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, you don't really think much of it. You think, oh yeah, I'm just moving it, you know, from one side of the garden bed to the other. yeah. That's the other thing now.
And then you happen to trip over that, you know, that 37 stage multi-cache that you haven't found, or, you know, the D5 puzzle that you haven't solved just yet.
That's right. I've just got a question here from Luke Allport. He said, I've been looking into hiding a cache in a New South Wales national park. It seems to be far more complex than Victoria. I found an application on their website, submitted but never heard back. Should I try the local office?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've done with the ones that I've hidden is pick up the phone and talk to a ranger. So ring on the New South Wales National Parks site, find the national park that you're dealing with. And so if you've submitted it, I will tell you what park it's in. Go and find that park, pick up the phone and have a conversation. Now, you will find that 9 times out of 10, you'll get a lot further if you pick up the phone and have a chat. And I know there's people on the line that I've seen that have great relationships with their local park ranger. And in most cases, it's a pretty sort of simple process. The history of it, though, for Luke is that there was a stage where, you know, we weren't allowed to hide caches within national parks in New South Wales. So it's really about just making sure it meets the requirements, and in most cases, and it is not going to damage the national park or the area. You know, it'll be fine. And really, that's I guess the genesis of geocaching New South Wales, right? It was born out of a need to engage with New South Wales national parks to really work through that sort of stuff.
Be that body to talk to them. Yeah.
And so the policy's there. I think it's actually a little bit out of date. You know, it's probably due for a review. But while it's there, that's the published one that we have. So that's what we follow. Because I've had a couple of people ask that question about, oh, hang on, isn't it out of date? No, well, it's the published document. So whilst it's still there, that's what we're following. So
that is the most current one. Yeah, awesome.
It's a really good one too for those moved caches. So you know, if you're moving your geocache, you want to make sure that you're not only worrying about the detail around the distances to other caches, but you could be moving it into an area. And if you move it into a conservation area or something, then we are not allowed to hide geocaches in those areas. So you have to be a little bit more careful. But the Geocaching New South Wales has got some great detail up on their site, and it's also in the regional policy pages where you can download the KML files and get an idea of what those areas are.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I've got Eva has also added on a bit there, another representative from the Geocaching New South Wales Committee. Remember that there are National Parks and Wildlife Services who have no idea about geocaching, so sometimes you have to guide them through the process too. So that's something to keep in mind as well when you reach out.
Absolutely. Though, if you start off with that conversation, you know, get an email from them. You know, I can send you through all the detail that I can find at my end. You know, maybe if you go and have a chat to somebody at your end, and I'll give you a call back in a week. Like, don't put too much pressure on them, right? Just, you play the long game, and you will find that in most cases it'll work out pretty favourably.
Yeah, be nice, be patient. Yeah, you're not the most important thing in their world, so you know, be patient. I've got a question here from GHHH. Not quite sure if you'll be able to help with this one, but they have seen 2 traditional caches less than 161 meters apart in my local area. How could this be? Oh, that could be a throwdown, or that could be satellite creep, or cache creep, or
Yeah, it could
yeah.
also be a really old school one. But I guess if it's a significant concern, like if they're 100 meters or they're 130 meters from each other, drop us
Yeah.
an email. I'm pretty sure you've got my email. Just drop me an email and I'll have a bit of a look at them. The challenge is if it's a really old school one, then we kind of grandfather some things sometimes and just say, you know what, it was a mistake. It probably shouldn't have happened, but we'll let it go and let it be. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is right. All right. Well, that is the end of the questions that I have organized for this evening. So if no one in the chat room has any more, I will say a big thank you to you for joining me tonight, Matt. Very appreciative of that. And thank you very, very much.
no worries at all.
Yeah. And like we've been saying through the whole show is if you've got any questions or you're not sure, just reach out. Matt is more than willing to answer those questions and help guide you through. So
Yep.
yeah, they're approachable.
The only thing I'd say is just have patience, right? I know that this brand new geocache you've got is the most important thing in your life.
Yeah.
If a reviewer responds to you with some questions, it's not a negative thing. It's just about we need a little bit more detail. We just want to make sure that we're not putting geocaching in a bad light. We're not going to cause a problem with a landowner like national parks. It is being done for a reason that's probably a bit bigger than your one little mint tin or whatever that you're trying to place at the time. So just respond calmly, and just it'll get through the process. The more communication we can get from people, the better off we are. With the message center, because I mentioned it earlier, like contact me via email or message center. I don't have the message center set up on my phone, and there's a pretty good reason for that, because a few years ago somebody decided that they were going to send me messages about every 15 minutes from midnight till about 4 a.m. when I hadn't responded to their cache that they'd resubmitted and put into the queue. So just like, I know sometimes it can take time. We when you submit a geocache, we say that we will start the process within 7 days.
That's right.
Are much more efficient than 7 days. I try and look at it a couple of times a week, but as I mentioned before, I'm also a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah.
I've got a family, I've got a job. There's sometimes things happen and I might not get to the queue for 3 or 4 days, but most of the time I try and look at it every day or every other day. So it can just depend on what's happening. So just be patient, and it'll certainly get there. But the more detail you can give me straight up front, the much more higher likelihood you have of getting it published first go. It's rather than just giving me nothing and I'm going to have to say, come on, need a little bit more. So
exactly.
No, look, any questions out of the session, just absolutely reach out. And if there's some detailed individual stuff, happy to reach out. If you ask me questions about how the site works or other sort of stuff, I probably can't answer it for you, but I'm more than happy to try and help you through a problem you might have with a geocache or something else. So thank you.
Yeah, that is right. So once again, thank you, Geocaching New South Wales for teeing this up. I am doing this broadcast on behalf of them. So they organised Matt and myself to bring this information to you, really. So really just so that you can learn and understand the requirements for your end as a hider to make Matt and the other reviewers' jobs that much easier and quicker and ease the frustration on everyone's part. So hopefully you've learned a few things out of this session as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, GC New South Wales. Once again, very appreciative. If you've got any further questions in relation to geocache hiding or requirements, reach out to Matt. But don't forget, there is a whole host of information that you can get from the websites as well. So jump online and have a look. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. We've got people from all over the world once again. So thank you, Houston, Texas, Dave, nice and early. We got Darkside Dan. He's joining us there. G Triple H, thanks for all your questions tonight. Very engaging, mate. Thank you. Team Astros joined us live. DTY, always here. Thank you very much. Who we've got him? Here we go. Fitzy, thank you. Sandy, Bill. What do we got here? We got Calypso was here. GeoKid NQ. Team Canaries here. There's Calypso62. Thank you for joining us, mate. Lex Woods, as well as Angel G. Thanks for joining us live. LLRPP, thank you. Let's go with all of these numbers and letters. Numbers and letters these days. Jono, thanks for joining us live. Hopefully you got some information out of that. Oh, Kingfisher you even joined us live. Thank you. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining live, and hopefully you've had a great weekend. And on behalf of Geocaching New South Wales and Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
See y'all.